So, couple of different things. Let me get this article pulled up. As you all know, Friday the 13th it's been locked in a crazy disgusting, speaking of crazy
I love
disgusting, there's
I love
MTV
Freddie
Freddy.
Hill.
I know. It's been locked in this crazy copyright war over who owns the rights for what. Victor Miller and Sean Cunningham were trying to say that, Friday the 13th isn't necessarily the hockey mask and Jason and the machete and the things that we associate with Friday the 13th, the franchise. They're
Yeah,
talking Friday the 13th, the original film, which, if you remember,
had nothing to do with.
had nothing. I mean, Jason was a character, obviously, but
Yeah, but
he
the hockey
wasn't
mask and
hockey
machete.
mask
Yeah.
adult Jason. It was Jason that we saw for 3 seconds at the end of the movie when he jumps out of the water and hearing his name. I mean, it was all about
Hmm.
Pamela and the story of how she kind of went nuts and stuff like that. So it's been locked up. We haven't, I mean, Friday the 13th has been on the bench for all this time. But Victor Miller has won the copyright termination appeal to reclaim the domestic rights to Friday the 13th. Jason. I don't know what just happened. Where did that go? There we go. All right, so let's break this thing down. So we've been waiting 2 years now for an update on the next stop in the Friday the 13th legal battle that's been raging on for several years now, and we finally have one today. But first, since it's been a minute, a little bit of recap. Ever since a judge ruled back in 2018 that Friday the 13th screenwriter Victor Miller is the sole owner of the original screenplay, in the US at least, Friday director Sean Cunningham has been working to have the decision reversed. So Victor Miller was the person who wrote the screenplay for the original Friday the 13th.
Hmm.
Sean Cunningham directed Friday the 13th, and we're talking about the original film. While the trial judge had ruled that the rights go to Miller after all these years under the Copyright Act's termination right, which allows authors to regain rights to work they signed over to a company, Cunningham and Horror Inc., which is Sean Cunningham's studio, were hoping that the Second Circuit Court of Appeals would end up reversing that decision. The Circuit Court was tasked with deciding if Miller will keep the rights to the Friday screenplay as decided in 2018, or if they'll revert back to Cunningham and Horror Inc. Mind you, there'll still be a whole lot to be worked through before Jason can return to the screen, no matter the decision. But this one is a massive legal hurdle that needed to be resolved first.
Mm.
So let's pause for a minute here. Let's
Okay.
pause. This does not mean, while Victor Miller has gotten the rights back to Friday the 13th, that doesn't mean that they're like, all right, let's go.
Let's make a
Jason,
movie.
let's make a movie. Like,
Not
he
the
can't do
case.
whatever he wants with it. That's
Hmm.
not what that means. That means that he owns the rights to the original film, the original property, not Friday Part 2, not Part 3, not the final chapter, not A New Beginning, not Manhattan, none of that stuff. He owns the rights to the original film. Where did my screen go? There we go.
There it is.
The Second Circuit was tasked with deciding if Miller will keep the rights. We already read that. The Hollywood Reporter's Eric Gardner, who has been a constant source of information on how this whole mess over the years, provides an update today, informing us that Victor Miller has now won the copyright termination appeal. In other words, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals has affirmed the district court's previous order, rejecting the argument and concluding that Miller was an independent contractor when he wrote the screenplay and is therefore entitled to authorship rights. Summary judgment has been awarded, therefore, to Victor Miller. As Eric explains, barring any reversal before a fuller panel at the Second Circuit or Supreme Court, this is going to the Supreme Court. Good Lord. Victor Miller will reclaim
Because it's
the
a high
domestic...
profile case. You like
It
only
really
like the
is.
only way you can honestly go to is if it's high profile. Honestly,
I know it sounds kind of crazy for the Supreme Court to be arguing over like who owns Jason. Like I feel like that's such a low thing on the totem pole right now, but like it is a high profile thing because it's a big property. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm sure it's a complex lawsuit or a legal battle between these two entities. So I mean, obviously it has to go to like it can't go to like your Joe Blow judge within that town. You know what I mean?
Right, for sure.
It has to go further.
Definitely.
By the way, I'm sorry for not knowing, but which one are we rooting for? Do you know what I mean? Like
I don't
there's obviously like a right and like obviously no, there's not a right and wrong, but there's someone you should root for. And I don't know like what happens. Like if either one gets it, what's gonna happen? Are we just either one is we're gonna get a Friday the 13th movie again, aren't we? Eventually. Like unless one of them is just going to take Friday the 13th and just bury it at a fight or some weird.
I don't know if I'm necessarily rooting for either one of them. I think they both need to man up and be like, look, we never intended for this movie to be what it became.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I mean that in a good way. Like, I don't think they ever expected it to become like one of the big 3 horror franchises. You know what I mean? I don't think that was ever the intention. I think very famously, Sean Cunningham saw Halloween and how successful the original Halloween was and was like, holy crap, we got to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think they decided they thought it was going to be the scariest movie ever made. And it was a huge success. But I don't think they ever intended on it to have, God, how many sequels? 9, 10, 11 sequels. I don't think they ever intended on it being as big as it was. And it's great that it became as big as it was.
Yeah, but as every little small project horror film. Like none of these horror films ever expected to blow up as big as it did. You know what I mean?
Right. I think my point in that, though, is that I think they both need to man up and be like, look, we were successful. Like, our work was a success. Here's your money. Here's my money. Go make another movie so we can make more money. But instead, they're trying to play whose is bigger, and they're whipping them out, and they're trying to figure out. I don't know. I wish they would just be like, look, we were both very successful with this. Like, let's take our chunk and move on. But they won't do that. And I also find it interesting that the person representing Victor Miller is also going to jump into this fight between Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's families and Disney and Marvel. He's going to be representing. So I don't know who which side he's representing.
By the way,
but Mark Toberoff.
I wonder, because you heard the news that they, settled with Black Widow.
I did. I saw that.
I wonder if they
and Scarlett Johansson said they're all good. That it's okay.
But I wonder if they just settled because of the Steve Ditko and Stan Lee lawsuit. You know what I mean? Like it's like we can't have two battles on 2 different fronts right now. That's we had this. It's literally like Marvel is doing, I guess, the right thing in regards to this. They're like saying like, hey, we want to keep this thing going. And I'm sure they apologize or they feel bad for the fact of what they're doing is wrong to certain people, and they want to rectify that. As compared to these two for Friday the 13th, it's like you said, it's like saying like who's is bigger, and they just keep tug of warring, not really realizing the amount of that's pretty I
really wish I would have just envisioned what you just said.
That did not come out right. Yep. Anywho. They do not realize the amount of revenue they could generate if they just settled their differences and just made this new Friday the 13th movie, because right now it's the time. Everyone is begging for a Friday the 13th movie right now because of Chucky, Halloween, and what else? Well, it's just those 2 major 80s oldie horror flicks are coming back, and Friday the 13th is still landlocked. Like they have no plans for it. I'm sure there's no plans for a Friday the 13th movie because they're too busy with this lawsuit.
I still say give it to Womp Stomp Films, man.
I don't
give
know
it to them. Never Hike Alone.
Oh,
give it to them, man.
Yeah, which I'm surprised they're even allowed to make a fan. Well, I guess they labeled it fan film, but still, it's
Yeah.
Those two fan flicks, it really like teased the horror fans, and they want to see more because they love seeing Jason, and this generation wants to see more Jason after seeing that fan flick. And I'm sure all of you can agree with me, like, I'm sure some of you have seen those two fan flicks and you loved it, so obviously you want to see more, but guess what, we can't because of this stupid ass lawsuit, which is, as Brad will always say, it's all about that money, 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 money.
It really is. It really is, and it's a shame. So this is a huge step in the process, but it certainly doesn't mean that Miller is now free to take the franchise and do whatever he wants with it. For now, until various deals are worked out behind the scenes, which will most likely still take a long time. For starters, owning the original screenplay, this is what we talked about earlier, does not mean that you own the character of adult Jason Voorhees as we know him, and Miller's ownership of the work only covers domestic rights. The franchise will remain dormant, but here's hoping we're almost at the point where Jason can return once more. And I actually have a better copy of the actual write-up from the court. Let me get this pulled up. So this is literally what the court documents say. The dispute concerns whether for Copyright Act purposes, the screenwriter Victor Miller was an employee or independent contractor of the film production company Manny Inc. in 1979 when Miller wrote the screenplay for the landmark horror film Friday the 13th, released in 1980. Almost 40 years later, in 2016, Miller gave notice to Manny, purporting to terminate. I don't know why I lost where I was. Purporting to terminate.
I can't read.
I really can't. I was like, purporting to terminate its copyright under the authority vested in authors by Section 203 of the Act. C or whatever. If Miller was Manny's employee when he wrote the screenplay, then it is a work made for hire, and that's the big thing. Work made for hire. That is from what I understand, that is the statement that is what won him this thing, because he was hired. The screenplay is a work made for hire. Under the act, Manny, not Miller, owns the screenplay, and Miller's notice is of no effect. Alternatively, if Miller was an independent contractor, Manny, when he wrote the screenplay, if certain other conditions are satisfied, then Miller is entitled to terminate Manny's and its successors' rights, and as author to reclaim it as his own. So he has terminated Sean Cunningham and Horror Inc.'s rights to the original film, and he has reclaimed it as his own property, as his own script, as his own story. Goes on, Manny argues primarily that Miller's membership in the Writers Guild of America East Incorporated, and as Manny's participation in the producers' collective bargaining agreement with the WGA in the same period, established that Miller was Manny's employee for Copyright Act purposes. We reject that argument and conclude that Miller was an independent contractor when he wrote the screenplay and is therefore entitled to authorship rights. Accordingly, the notice of termination that he gave under Section 203 is effective as to Manny and its successors. We therefore affirm the district court's order granting summary judgment to Miller, and that was affirmed. So there you have it. Victor Miller owns the rights to the original Friday franchise. Once again, if you're just joining us, that does not mean that Victor Miller owns the rights to adult Jason Voorhees.
The one we all know and love, yeah.
The one we all know and love, and any of the characters that came after the original film. It's just that original film. Now, here's the kicker, and here's my big hope. My hope is that instead of dragging all of this through court again to see who has the rights to make another movie, my hope is that a lot of this can be settled out of court in terms of who owns what. Victor Miller obviously owns Friday the 13th, the original film and screenplay. But hopefully we can try to figure out they can try to figure out who does own the rights to adult Jason and to those characters, and that we can do that out of court. I feel like if it's in court, it's just going to get dragged out, and it's just going to take longer and longer and longer and longer.
It'd be much better just to settle this stuff, within each other's offices. I mean,
Right.
I've seen Suits a couple of times, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. No.
I think if it's settled out of court, we'll get a Friday the 13th film much faster.
Much faster. But
Yeah.
again, we're thinking. I'm not gonna lie. I would be thinking years until we even get another flick.
Oh yeah, I would get.
Yeah.
My guess would be at least 3 or 4 years before we even get rumblings of another Friday the 13th film.
Yep.
Now,
Unfortunately.
good thing for us, we have the Womp Stomp films. We have Jason Rising. We have God, what's another? There's a lot of really good Friday the 13th fan films out there, and that's great because we're not getting any official Friday the 13th content. So it's really great that we're getting that stuff.
And we're not saying it's like second par, like, oh, okay, I guess I have with this. No, it's a pretty good film.
Some of those movies of those Jason fan films are about as good looking as like an actual studio backed film.
They do. And really the fact that it's low budget kind of makes it, even though it's like not as like high budget as like a Hollywood flick as compared to like the most recent Jason movie, Friday the 13th movie, whereas that one seemed more obviously you could tell it's high budget. I don't know, lower budget horror films kind of do it for me right now, as long as the writing's good.
I mean, like, you know, when I watched Never Hike in the Snow, I actually thought to myself, I am proud that I contributed to this. Like it made me proud. I was like, man, I'm proud of this. Like, I'm glad that I donated a little bit of money to this. And I would do it again. I same thing with what Dave McRae and Bruce Dale did with It's Me, Billy. I mean, there are guys like that are upping the fan film game in a time, especially for Friday the 13th, when we are not getting any Friday the 13th stuff right now because this has been locked up. So if you're just joining us, Victor Miller has won back the franchise right, or not the franchise rights, the rights to the original Friday the 13th film. And our hope is that they will settle who owns adult Jason Voorhees and all of the characters that came after from Friday Part 2 and later, and all of the other details out of court so that we will get a Friday the 13th film quicker than that next time. It's like, I feel like the guy on that commercial, what is it, a Capital One commercial or something? You got to be quicker than that.
Fingers crossed.
The dollar bill on the fishing pole. Hopefully, man, fingers crossed. Jay did.